All right, welcome back. Hononegah, Algebra 1, 9.5 Day 2. And ultimately, this is an overview of everything. When you're given a quadratic, a lot of times you're going to be asked just to solve it. And so you're going to have to kind of make your own decision as to, okay, what way am I going to solve it? And so the number one method, or the method that most people are going to choose, is going to be factoring. And I know some of you don't like to factor, but it is one of the most straightforward ways of solving a quadratic. Graphing, again, unless you're going to be using a graphing calculator or something like that, ultimately graphing is not a method that we ultimately see a lot of. It's more of a visual situation. Like, oh, look, it's crossing the x-axis in these two locations, so that's where the solutions are going to be. Square root property. Okay, square root property is kind of a technical one. Like if you basically need an x squared only. Like if I see just an x squared, then that would be the method that I would go with. Completing the square is something that we are not going to do right now, so we're going to cross that one off. And then the quadratic formula. This is literally the number two method. So if I can't factor something and I don't have just an x squared, then I'm going to go to the quadratic formula. So here we go. I'm going to have four examples. This is going to be very short notes. Basically, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to decide which method I'm going to go to. So here we go. The very first one, x squared plus 11x minus 12 equals 0. I can see right away this is factorable. I see that two things multiply to be negative 12 that add up to be 11. So again, that is my go-to method. That is my number one method if I see something that is easily factorable. Okay, so I come up with the numbers that are multiplied to be negative 12 that add up to be 11. I set the parentheses equal to 0, and I solve. So again, that is number one. That is the method that I'm going to go to if I see something that's factorable. Next, I only see an x squared. Well, if I only see an x squared, my go-to method is going to be square root property, because I can solve this for x squared and then take the square root of both sides. Don't forget, anytime you take the square root of both sides, you're always going to get a plus or minus answer. So this one is plus 1 and minus 1. That does not mean that I couldn't do factoring, and that does not mean that I couldn't use the quadratic formula. All of these can be done in every single method except for factoring. Only certain things can be factorable. All right, so now it's not factorable. There's not just an x squared. So my go-to method is going to be the quadratic formula. A is 1, B is 2, C is negative 5. And as we learned yesterday, as we learned in the previous section, negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. The hard part about this is going to be the stuff that's under the radical. So 2 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 5 is 24. Square root of 24, using my calculator now, is plus or minus 4 point, we'll say 4.9 rounding, divided by 2. And so now, negative 2 plus 4.9 divided by 2 is, this splits into two questions. So I'm going to add and get 2.9 divided by 2 is 1.45. The second one I'm going to subtract. I'm going to get negative 6.9 divided by 2 is negative 3.45. So again, it's not factorable, so throw that one out. It doesn't have just an x squared, so you throw that one out. So I automatically then go to my go-to, which is the quadratic formula. Put a little divider in here so we got some space. No matter what method you're using, other than the square root property, you need it to equal 0. Again, nothing that I see here that ultimately allows me to factor. So negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Well, I see that this is going to have a bit of a problem. Okay. Square root of 32. So on my calculator now, I'm going to take the square root of 32, which is 5.66. So 6 plus or minus 5.66 divided by 2, which is then going to split into two answers. 6 plus 5.66 and divide it by 2, you get 5.83. And 6 minus 5.66 and divide it by 2, you're going to get 0.17. So again, as I am looking at a particular question, now I'm trying to decide, should I use factoring? Should I use the quadratic formula? Should I use should I use the square root property? I can use graphing, but again, graphing really only works if it's factorable, if it's something that crosses the x-axis at integers. So these two questions would not be good questions for graphing. So that concludes today. Okay, I'm not going to do this example at all. So that concludes today. You should have a homework assignment. I'm not sure, I'm circling this, but I'm not sure what that assignment might be. But again, check your Google Classroom. Make sure that you're understanding material. If you have any questions, please make sure you are contacting your teacher. I wish you best, and I hope everybody stays safe.